We will begin our council work session for Tuesday, November 8th. Need an approval of the agenda.
So move.
Second,
All in favor?
Yes.
Our first order of the day is public comment. Chance?
Jan Siebert Ormond and my husband Wes Ormond, PO Box 778 Cannon Beach 97110. Dear Mayor and City Councilors, regarding the issue of an engineering study requested for the drainage area of 7th and North Laurel Street, we have some concerns. Number one, this area is known to contain an important waterway and wetlands that have both native salmon and native cutthroat trout, which require protection. Two, just a block away at 6th and North Larch Street, where we live, the city of Cannon Beach created a salmon habitat restoration project some years ago. This area connects with both Logan Creek and the stream/wetlands at 7th and North Laurel Street. Three, as neighbors in this area, we are all stewards of this essential habitat, as is the city of Cannon Beach. Four, if some residents are concerned about flooding issues on their property, we believe it may be their responsibility to look into possible alternatives, such as bioswales, to respond in environmentally friendly ways. Five, can we all trust that there will be an open and public process in regard to this matter? It is of vital importance that we as a community come together and share information and find solutions that respect the wildlife residents as well as the human ones. Thank you. P.S. We've just learned that this item was pulled from the agenda tonight. Why? Will this process be public? Please make sure that it is. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Anybody else in the audience? Do we have anybody online who would like to make a comment? Okay. Last call? Okay, not seeing anybody. We will move on to our first topic. This is a discussion about Arch Cape. Jeff?
So Mayor and Council have come before you tonight to talk about Arch Cape Force community workforce housing, but I didn't want to let those that may be departing from the council without one last PowerPoint.
Thank you so much.
You know, I had to get that in, you know, and didn't want you to go away. And I also like to know if I could have certain members, at least their spouses, still bring candies to, you know, I don't know if I can extend the time period. Anyhow, but I did want to touch on, I think this is a great opportunity to kind of catch you up on the affordable and workforce housing regionally and in Cannon Beach. So I'm using Chet's, introducing Chet's Arch Cape Community Force Project, introduce that to you. But I'd also like to provide a Clatsop Regional Housing Task Force update. And then the available Cannon Beach Affordable Housing Fund, update you on where that status of that. And then discuss Cannon Beach Affordable Housing Program, which is mentioned in the ordinance, and then terms and process for future development. So to begin with, I think, one of the things that's often discussed and, people get confused about affordable workforce housing. Well, I just want to touch on these terms of use because they'll become more important as we start getting into actually having a true program and working hopefully regionally on a program. But housing is considered affordable by HUD when a household spends no more than 30% of its annual income on housing costs. Mortgage lenders typically require that households spend no more than a set percentage of income on mortgage payments, taxes, and insurance. And the HUD guidelines are directed to serve households at or below 60% area median income. Now, workforce housing is home ownership and rental housing that is reasonably affordable to middle income employees, including retail salespersons, office and service workers, public employees, such as police officers, firefighters, teachers, integral to the community, but too often cannot afford to live in the communities they serve. And so the Urban Lands Institute defines workforce housing as a 60 to 120%. These are terms from actual Eagle County's regional housing page. And what it describes is pretty much simply affordable housing in a lot of these communities is all housing that is at usually 120% or below. Some of the mountain town communities allowed to go higher, but they will all usually say workforce housing is for a certain area, usually that county or the jurisdictions they're working with. And then they have to work in those communities a certain number of hours per year, and then only have that permanent residence there. And so that's kind of how we're going forward talking about this, is that there affordable housing is a certain 60 to say 120% to start the discussion. But workforce housing really talks about also the workers in your community and being able to live within the community in a secondary kind of market. The state, however, defines it this way within their ordinances as affordable housing is 80% or less of the area median income, and then or the average of all units of property is made available to families with incomes of 60% or less, and whose affordability is enforceable for no less than 30 years. Okay. And so it also states in the state code that may not require a zone change or a conditional use permit for affordable housing on property if the housing is owned by the public body and it's a nonprofit corporation is organized as a religious corporation, or the property is zoned for commercial uses, allow religious assembly, or as public lands. And so where it gets tricky, and what a lot of discussion currently throughout the state is about, and in our region, is this next section. And so the subsection here states that it starts getting into, where this applies. It applies on property zoned to allow for industrial uses only if the property is publicly owned, adjacent to lands for residential use or schools, and not specifically designated for heavy industrial uses. And it does not apply on lands where the local government determines that the development on the property cannot be adequately serviced by water, sewer, stormwater, streets, your typical services. The property contains a slope of 25% or greater. The property is within a 100-year floodplain. And then the real kicker, the development of the property is constrained by land use regulations based on statewide land use planning goals relating to natural disasters and hazards or natural resources. So that really constrains a lot of things, especially in our area. And I'll show you how much so here in a minute. And the other component of this, needed housing. So local governments may adopt and apply only clear and objective standards conditions and procedures regulating the development of housing, included needed housing. Now, you can have an alternative process, but you also have to have those clear and objective standards, and that comes to even affordable and even to these sensitive lands or these other areas we're talking about. So statewide, the state has initiated a large process to look at this. And there's really a housing capacity and a housing needs, two different working groups that have worked for the last 6 months on this process. They have some recommendations out there for the legislature, and the legislature is starting to work on housing as one of their top priorities. Ours is based on the housing needs report that was recently done. And just by the numbers, you can see for our region, Clatsop County, 4,295 needed units by 2040. And so how do we meet these? They have it for each jurisdictions. That's part of our discussion for our Clatsop Housing Regional Task Force. And we are starting to look at those kind of supply or capacity side of things, and then the constraints and other things that will be limited in those. And so just the most recent Clatsop Housing Regional Task Force, we looked at mapping assets and constraints for our area. And so I wanted to show you guys just briefly how that plays out. When you look at that language that's currently in the state statutes, how does that play out? This is the north side from Macola Creek north, looking at the properties at Cannon Beach. Yellow is, of course, the city boundaries. But if you look at these properties and you put in the steep slopes, this is by our ordinances, anything over 20% is now frosted out. In other words, these are constrained by that language, okay? That's the floodplain. Fortunately, Cannon Beach doesn't have much floodplain in this special flood hazard area. But then you throw in the wetlands. So those are just the wetlands identified in our local wetlands inventory. When you throw in what we call wetland lots of record, all those others that are just frosted, you can see that puts in further constraints. Once you put in the small and medium inundation zone of the tsunami, you're left with far fewer lots in the northern section. If you look at how many of those are vacant lots, which are now the bright pink ones, 7 or 8 that are not constrained. And then if you look at all those that are zoned for multifamily use, which are now the blacked out vacant ones, meaning none are zoned for multifamily use. And then publicly owned. So those language that says, well, you can build on public lands. Well, we have none within our boundaries in the northern section. So I've done that for each one of our sections here. So here's downtown, and this taking all the constraints put together. Those pink ones are the only ones that are vacant lands still available. Those are the ones that are left after we're looking at what are multifamily zone lands, which is none. And those are the publicly owned lands, which are all constrained. In the presidentials, those are the vacant lands still left and outside. There's a number of them. How many are multifamily zoned? None of them. How many are publicly owned? Just the RV park. So if we go to Haystack area, you're seeing some outside our area there that are coming up there. But if you focus on the vacant lands within the city limits, you can see there's probably a dozen properties there, but none are multifamily zoned. And we have no public lands that are not constrained. Down in North Tolovana, just a few lands outside of constrained, no multifamily zoned, and none in publicly owned. Vacant lands in the Tolovana, the central area of Tolovana, you can see Haystack Heights on the other side of the highway there. A few vacant properties. You can also see some vacant properties just outside the inundation zones. And then you can see that a few of those remain because those are zoned R3, those 7 or 8 properties through there. and the few public, that's I think Tolovana Arts down there. And then the south boundary down to the south of Tolovana area, we do the same thing. There is a couple in the R3 area along the highway. And then of course, Southwind, which is constrained by steep slopes. So just a little update of how constrained the city of Cannon Beach's current footprint is. I haven't done, there, like I said, there are some surrounding up there on the northern section. There are some in the UGB areas, but very few kind of vacant areas that are quote unquote buildable under state statute type of limitations. So a dozen or so total properties that would meet that requirement of state statutes. So before I introduce Chad, just kind of update you on the staff report and some of the discussion I have in there. I talk about the one project that we have had since 2018, and we've had the construction excise tax since then. And that was CLARC, which had 8 units. We gave about $20,000 in service development and building fee waivers towards that as part of the development agreement, which is there. And it's for a 10-year term. So it's a 10-year period that will expire in 2028 or 29, around there. And so just probably about halfway through there on now. And so then those are not held to the deed restriction following that. And then the construction excise tax, the language from that, the city may retain up to 4% of the taxes collected for payment toward administrative expenses. For the tax imposed on residential improvements, the net revenues after deducting administrative expenses would be distributed as follows. 15% of net revenue will be remitted to the Oregon Department of Housing and Community Services to fund the home ownership programs. 50% of our net revenue on residential will be transferred to Affordable Housing Fund to support developer builder incentives. That's what we did there with CLARC for affordable housing authorized by the city. 35% of the net revenue will be transferred to the city's Affordable Housing Fund to support the city's affordable housing program. So it's fairly broad on what it's allowed to be put towards. C, for the tax imposed on commercial improvements, 100% of net revenue will be distributed to the Affordable Housing Fund to support the city's program. So that is still very broad in how that's done. We have currently about $250,000 in the Affordable Housing Fund on hand. And so, I would say the majority of that, at least from the language, can be used towards what we'll be talking about in this and likely for future projects. So I'm going to let Chet Moritz discuss his project. I'll work the magic with the PowerPoint, and Chet can feel free to ask him questions. He wants to kind of give you an update of this. He has presented this as one of the scenarios to our affordable housing task force, the Regional Affordable Housing Task Force, just to show from a development perspective, the difficulties in trying to do this type of work. And I think he's a great example of how do we move these kind of projects forward, and how do we prepare for these, and how it can inform our processes and developing that program going forward. So go ahead, Chet.
Awesome. Thank you, Jeff, Mayor and councilors. I'll try to be brief because I'd love to have a dialogue. Questions, suggestions are more than welcome. My name is Chet Moritz. I represent a nonprofit called North Coast Housing Solutions. We formed because we're intrigued by Clatsop County's offer of 12.5 acres of surplus land down in Arch Cape. If you can go to the next slide. You can see the aerial photograph here. The very south end of Arch Cape, just before the tunnel, leads into Oswald West State Park, accessed by East Beach Road and East Shingle Mill Lane, shown at the bottom of the map there. It's 12.5 acres of about a 70-year-old forest. Our goal is to develop affordable housing units, small cottages organized in cottage clusters to have minimal impact on the forest, but yet house about 50 working members of the North Coast. We'll see, I don't know if I put the topo in here, but we'll see it's above the tsunami inundation zone, starting about 40 or 50 feet, going up to about 200 feet in elevation. Then go to the next slide, Jeff. Just another view of the tax lots there and a couple of photographs taken near the entrance on 3rd Avenue. You can see 3rd Avenue at the very bottom of the map. It's similarly named north of Wall Street, actually paved to within about 100 feet of the property. We've had estimates for putting in utilities and roads. Again, our goal is to be a very light footprint on the land, 1-lane gravel drives once we're on the property, obviously public roads leading up the easements to the property. Estimate for that work is about $1 million, which amortized over the 50 units is about $20,000 per unit. So expensive, but within reach, I think. Go on to the next slide there. This shows the wetlands and also the topography. There's one wetland close to the property. It would be on the extension of Fire Rock Road. If you trace that north, just before you reach the edge of the property, there's a very small wetland that we've circled there in red. That will probably dictate the access on either 3rd Avenue, Ravenhill Road, or an extension of Walsh Lane that may wrap around to the east side. North is, of course, up on all these maps. Things we like about this, we're out of the flood zone, we're out of the tsunami inundation zone. Actually, a fairly gentle slope on the southern portion. If you think of it as a U shape, our image up there, we're missing some of the U, but think about it as a U shape facing up towards the ocean. The ocean is on the left side of these images. The southern part of the U, the 4 or so tax parcels there, each one of those large parcels about 1.3 acres. There's a few little cutouts that aren't offered and a few on the northern edge that are. That southern edge is a very gentle slope. It's very buildable, and even the eastern edge coming up. As you get to the northern side, that's what we use as our community open space as the offset for clustering the density of these cottages towards the southern side. Go on to the next slide. So some of our inspiration for these cottage clusters, you can visit these down in Manzanita. A gentleman named Ross Chapin from Langley, Washington has done a nice little cottage cluster there. It's called the Classic Street Cottages. You may not know it's there. It's right behind the Manzanita Hardware, the Big Wave Cafe. If you start to go into town and take a left, parking is on the exterior of most of the units, nice grassy open spaces. You may have forest instead of grass, but the idea is you'll see here in a schematic coming up is to cluster these units in about groups of 10 per acre and concentrate those on the 5 sort of southern and eastern, and then leave the northern side, which is much steeper and contains more old growth trees. Leave that as a community open space. Go on to the next slide. This is just a super early schematic of how we might do what we call cottage duos. So studio, utility studio apartments to be rented, 2 units, one on top of the other, just for efficiency, sharing a wet wall, sharing a roof line, and again, having a minimal impact on the forest. Goal would be to put in pier and beam foundations rather than concrete. And again, just have a very light footprint on the forest. There's many sites where no trees would need to be removed to tuck these amongst the trees. Obviously, some trees will need to be removed for the roads and the infrastructure. The goal is to tread very lightly, again, early schematic showing 2 phases. First road leading back to the west towards the ocean, and phase 1 servicing again about 5 buildings or 10 units per again, acre being 1+ acres. Those under blue outlines. So about 20 individuals, 20 working members of the community living in phase 1, and about 30 units, 30 individuals in phase 2. The county has restricted this to 80% and below area median income. So our goal there, these are volunteer firefighters, these are first-year teachers, nursing assistants, really the working members of the North Coast. We would maintain these and offer them as rental units. Looked at home buying, land trust type solutions, haven't found a great one there. But the hope would be to leave this deed restricted for as long as possible. And really just looking for partnerships with local jurisdictions who might want to help with some of the costs up front, partner to get this off the ground. So questions and comments and my contact information, of course, here if we don't get through today.
Would this be restricted strictly for people who are working in this area? So that it wouldn't be second homeowners or short-term rentals or anything like that?
Definitely not second homeowners or short-term rentals. The deed restrictions have yet to be written. Specifically, our vision would be people working full-time, so at least 30 hours per week, at least 9 months per year on the North Coast, and that follows some of the mountain community deed restrictions. Happy to go more than that, but we have to be a little cautious with fair housing rules and things. If we're ultra restricted, but absolutely not rentals, absolutely not second homes. These are for full-time workers on the North Coast.
Could you put the deed restriction to in perpetuity?
That is one option. Right now, the county is asking for 20 years. So our negotiations, I'm very open to going longer than that.
Yeah,
Part of our negotiations and part of the fundraising that we're doing is seeing when we can break even on the costs. Right now, with interest rates sky high, we have to be a little bit cautious. It's in perpetuity if the rents would never pay off the interest accumulated on a standard loan. But there are many different ways to finance it, including affordable housing tax credits and other things. So we just need to be careful that we don't overcommit ourselves.
do you have an estimate of what a rental would be?
Yeah, we would use the same rental that's set by the state. So for someone making 80% area median income, which would be the top level currently allowed by the county, rent would be about 1,100.
Ah, okay,
And that's all based on less than 30% of their annual income to not be rent burdened. It's just slightly less than that. And there are tables that I'm happy to share links that are set by the state. So we're just following those tables.
well, and I have been to the Manzanita development that you've talked about, and the square footage is larger there, isn't it?
It is.
How much?
Those are more like 600 square feet.
Okay,
One bedrooms, those are typically one bedrooms, and we're open to that, but we have a very tight balance to run between building costs, as you understand, and time to break even on the return from the rent. So we're trying to balance those two, and we're trying to serve what we believe is the biggest need in the community, which are single workers or couples, as opposed to larger families, and try to find an efficient studio type. We're open to a one bedroom, but that gets us up and around the 600 square foot mark. It
right.
just raises the building cost a little bit, makes it more
Uh-huh.
harder to fit in amongst the trees.
And have you had geologic studies done there?
We have not, but we have access to all the public records on the adjacent lots. And if you go back one or two slides, I can point out it's about 5 lots that have recently had geotech right on the border of the property. So if you look at the very right edge of the slide, north of Walsh Lane and east of something called Raven Hill, which is not labeled there, but it's the white line. 4 of those lots have geotech and 1 to the west of Raven Hill, immediately on the edge of this property. So while it is in a state landslide zone, the geotech engineers have ruled that that's just based on general slope and that the soils are stable from those adjacent.
Okay.
Is this, is this these would be rentals? These would not, nobody would be buying these homes?
That's our goal to begin with. One of the reasons that I'm hedging a little bit on the length of the deed restriction is that one possible financial strategy would be to sell a small portion of the units at the end of 20 years in order to repay any debt that has accumulated. We're not able to finance it with debt-free loans or other things. Based on current interest rates, we would be looking at a situation where the rent would not actually even pay the interest rates. So we would need an exit strategy where we would need to sell a portion of those. Just to pay back the loan. We're hoping not to have to do that. We're hoping to partner with local jurisdictions, donors, grant funding, in order to bring in the necessary revenue up front, because the rent will certainly pay the maintenance costs and then we can stay in perpetuity. It's getting back the building costs. A year ago at 1.5% interest rates, this would have been easy. We're looking at 7% interest rates right now.
And we're looking at 8 by the end of the year.
Exactly,
Yeah.
6% even for a craft 3 7-year loan. So when you look at the amount of debt service on those interest rates, it's phenomenal.
How much do you expect this is going to cost to build?
So the total estimate now is $1 million for the infrastructure and about 200,000 for each of the units.
And how many units did you say?
About 50.
50 units. And where are you getting the funds for building?
It's a good question. So the excise tax fund is one potential. That's why I'm here today, to gather your input. There's 2 possible routes to funding. We can restrict the units to 50% and below area median income, which serves a slightly different population, and then have a chance where they become quite competitive at accessing affordable housing tax credits. We won't be able to access the 9% federal tax credit. It's restricted to 30% and below. We'll have a chance at the 4% federal tax credit. And what that allows investors to do is realize that tax credit on other assets that they have in exchange for essentially giving an interest-free loan to the project. Personally, I think that this particular location in this community would benefit people more closer to the 80% area median income. There is a bus that runs from Tillamook to Cannon Beach 3 times a day. There's not currently a stop here. We're exploring whether a stop could be added. people who have cars, I think will have an easier time coming and going from this property. It's not near an urban center. It's not near the type of social services that someone in that 30 to 50% area median income might like to have nearby. So our vision is that this is for the 80%, on average 80% area median income, but unfortunately, that doesn't give us access to the tax credits. So we'll need to finance it in other ways.
Well, and Shorewood always concerned me, which is right over there. Because when they tried to get that property to have the housing for the locals, they didn't qualify. Seaside did. So that's what ended up happening. And so it's important that you make sure that these people here can be the ones that are there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's our goal. Cannon Beach is the closest municipality. It's about 10-minute drive to the southern edge of Arch Cape, as I'm sure you all know. So that's our goal. And it's just finding the funding strategies that will allow us to do the building without needing to incur a lot of debt.
The 3 properties inside the U, have you contacted those owners?
We have, yeah, those are owned by the Markham family. And the Markham family is actually in the process of donating those to the Watershed Preserve, which we think is wonderful and being more open space adjacent to this land. Certainly, if we were authorized by the county to consider land swaps and things, we would be open to that, but that's, I think, for a future conversation. But it'll be nice. There's actually already one new watershed preserve to the east of this in Arch Cape that you may be familiar with. And there's conversations about to the northern edge, an old piece of forest land that may also be preserved. So it's a nice area adjacent to a lot of open space that I think creates a very nice feel. I don't know, Jeff and Denise, maybe you can comment. We walked the property yesterday and just the feel of sort of being in the forest and having that surrounded by nature.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful spot. It's not as, I've been in some parts of there and was worried about how steep it might be and everything, but no, there's pretty gentle slopes. And I can see, 2 or 3 possible, that's what excites me about the project, is that there are 2 or 3 possible access approaches to the sites. There's possible partnerships, as you said, that might help with some of the infrastructure. So I think there's a lot of good things going for this type of project. And, I think the county showing the leadership to put out these surplus lands and start kind of shopping certain areas for possible projects, at least gets the conversation going, and we can further kind of regional discussions.
One other question, when this was brought up at the first county meeting, that the one I attended, my first thought, and might be something that you should work with, is if some of the spaces were opened up, so somebody who has a tiny home could bring it in and park it. You don't have to build one then. You might fit that in there somewhere, and all you need to do is prepare the pad and have the utilities. So I don't know how many people out there have that kind of option, but it would be something else to work with.
Yeah, thanks for that input. And we have looked at other options like modular construction, talked to the group Hacienda out of Portland, they work with Mass Timber. They're piloting several different sites, including one in Lincoln City, where they do essentially a prefab structure like a tiny home built in the Port of Portland and then trucked out here and set down on the pads. It's not something that an individual would own, but it could save a lot on the construction. There are some concerns about the weatherproofness of those structures. I think we'll let them test it in Lincoln City first before we commit. There was going to be one in Nehalem. They ran out of budget, I think, so they weren't able to site it there. But we have had some great conversations about different kinds of modular construction, talking to one of the architects about flat packing designs built under cover so they're dry and sealed and then just erected on site. That's a great suggestion to do. Okay.
Cool.
Chad, what are your timing or your hope for timing on having a package put together to be able to go out for financing?
Yeah, so we're going to submit a notice of interest to the county in about 2 weeks. Our goal is to get that in before Thanksgiving. We just got the infrastructure bid this morning, so that was the final piece that we needed on our due diligence. So now we can submit a pro forma showing the total cost, about 10 million that you asked about, and different ways to finance it, including the tax credit options or local partners. The hope is that the county will be receptive to that notice of interest. I imagine there'll be some back and forth in a working session with the county representative, similar to what we're doing here. And then if and when the lands are given to the nonprofit, then we would be in a position to go out for both financing and fundraising.
And is there an anticipated date for the lands to be turned over?
There is not, as far as I know, but I can say that in March of 2023, so about 6 months from now, if no nonprofit has put together a feasible proposal, that the lands will go up for public auction for for-profit development.
So there's some.
Several for-profit
here.
developers have shown interest in the land, so.
Have you considered creating 2-story units to get more rooms per unit?
Yes, we absolutely have. And actually, if you can go to that scale, I didn't make it clear when
I guess my question is rather than having it as a duplex, just have it all in one so that you could have, you know, a family in there.
Interesting. Yeah, I think, I showed the interior stairwell here just based on some advice we had about trying to keep exterior stairwells dry. But you could certainly imagine connecting these 2 units and having it be a double-sized unit, as you say, for a small family.
Okay.
Yeah, we're open to different designs. Our understanding, and from looking at the 2016 Affordable Housing Report that was done by the city, our understanding was that the biggest need locally is for the single worker or the couple rather than the family, but we're open to different designs.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and it's all zoned residential. I see Arch Cape being opposed when it's not, but I think most of the community is rather supportive of something if it already is set that way.
Yeah, it's zoned Arch Cape residential, Arch Cape RCR, currently 1 home and 1 ADU per acre, but with a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet. And so we will need to work with the county closely to do probably just a slight amendment to their cottage cluster ordinance, which they call a cluster development ordinance. Maybe a little density tweak, depending on whether we choose to vacate the intervening public right-of-ways to bump the acreage up a little bit. We actually get very close if we vacate the right-of-ways. Otherwise, we might just need a little increase in density. Otherwise, hopefully not having to rezone, but that's another option.
Yeah.
To rezone for multifamily, which will require public comment periods in the usual review.
Have you talked to the Arch Cape Water?
We have had great conversations with Bill Chick of Arch Cape Sewer and Water. He has about 135 extra sewer hookups and 135 extra water hookups within their plan. So we would be responsible, of course, for running the piping to this land. It's actually just an intriguing idea, which is in very, very early stages. Talked to both Bill Chick and Jay Blake, who's a member of their sewer and water board there in Arch Cape, also a planner in the city of Warrenton. They're looking for a site for a water tower in the southern portion of the city. So dreaming wildly, we had thought about if they wanted to run a service road and some piping, either on or near this property, we would certainly be willing to partner with that to offset some of the cost of the infrastructure.
Right. That's great.
Yeah.
Sounds great. And I like it in Arch Cape. When we talked earlier as a group going to the county, we were looking more at the junction. And this seems so much more fitting.
Yeah, I think for our full-time workers, it's a beautiful setting to live in, right? Somewhere I'd like to live, right? You look out your back door and you're surrounded by a nice forest, 7-year-old forest. So it has that, I think it has that special feel. It would be a shame to see it go for-profit second homes. And you can go and look at all the adjacent lots around there and they've all been clear cut and almost all of them are being built as second homes. So I think that's the alternative. So that's partly why we've been so excited about a chance to do affordable housing for the working members of the community there.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I'd like to continue the discussion on this.
Yeah, and as far as our using our excise tax to the benefit of the region, that's within our purview.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was going to discuss next steps. Thank you, Chet.
Thanks, Jeff.
So, yeah, so my thought is brought up almost every one of the kind of key points. I think each of you with your questions brought up all those key things. You know, currently, we kind of limit to 80%. You know, he's talking about 80%. But when we start talking about our processes and how we want to do things going forward, I think we need to have further discussion how a program would work so that if we have these coming forward within Cannon Beach, if that happens, or regionally, that we have some kind of system and some kind of guarantees. Not to say that they won't bring this before you in work sessions to ask your opinions on early in the days, but we'd like to have some kind of, here's how we've done and in the past, and here's what we expect out of, you know, whether it's in perpetuity. I think that's the next slide. Let's see. Yeah, 30-year or in perpetuity. Is the funds for building fees and limited just to building fees and system development charges? Or can we go to allowing gap funding in some kind of a lot of the mountain town communities do it by a kind of a workforce model where they tier it by those 80 to 150 or whatever it is, and then they may give stipends for rental units to offset some of that, as he discussed. You know, some of these are difficult to do. So there's some different gap financing formulas that we may look at as we develop a program. And then to allow the program to expend funds regionally, which is really the reason I think Chet came before you, is that, you know, we've only done CLARC. You know, as I showed you, the language from the code is pretty broad, doesn't say that we're limited. So, you know, if you guys are excited to buy this project, or you at least to have the discussion continued, I'd like to bring it back before. I would anticipate January, since the new council will be seated, and come back before you in January to continue the discussion on more details towards at least setting up a program with this in mind.
I think this is the first really concrete program, I'll call it, to really address the workforce housing. And we certainly ought to be moving forward with it. I think the key is, and I think that's what you were alluding to, we need to have a process, an understandable process in place. So when someone else comes to us, they know what the next steps are going to be, rather than, well, we'll go to the council.
All right, right.
So
Yeah.
Got to find a way to make it understandable so they can then look at what kind of financing they need. And as they go look for financing, they can say, this is what City of Cannon Beach is prepared to do. Here's their process.
Right.
So,
And then if they want to go beyond that or ask for exceptions to that kind of process, then that's when they would come before you for approval. Does that sound good to you guys?
Yes.
great.
Yeah. Well, so I just want to close out here, giving you a little update. Regional Housing Task Force met. We had our 4th meeting in October. We talked about, like I said, asset mapping and some of those constraints I showed you. And we will likely have our next meeting in January. As Henry Balanceifer said, it's hunting season, so we need to appreciate that with the holidays. But no, we made, I think, a lot of headway. All of our materials are available on the Housing Matters website, our Housing Matters website, on our City of Cannon Beach page. Shows if you do a search, Cannon Beach Housing Matters, Google it or whatever, it will bring you to that. All of the materials on there. A lot of the materials we'll be talking about in January are going to be kind of built on a few of these guidelines from other mountain town communities, some of their programs, which I would like to discuss with you on how we might incorporate those. And so before I sign off, I would like to thank Brandon and for your leadership and being in each one of those. For Sam.
Here's one. Sam.
Yes, and Sam for stepping in, and Bruce for showing up for these meetings and being supportive of this regional effort. I think it's going to be something that, you know, is going to make a large contribution to our workforce and affordable housing in the next year. I want to make a note that unfortunately that goes across the title, but there's a North Coast Housing Summit is going to be held December 6th in Seaside. If you don't know about it, you haven't signed up for it yet, please email me or whatever. I'll get the information out. We'll also post it and then it's DLCD is putting it on, Department of Land Conservation Development, and will be hosted up there by some of the elected officials. And it's going to be a regional discussion with Tillamook and Columbia County, I think, as well. I know that I've been asked to be on a panel with some of the planners and other people that have been working regionally. And so I think a few hours. And so if you haven't and you're interested in this, please also visit that site. And there's the details there and who you can register with. I'll also post this presentation on our Housing Matters website, which will have this information as well. And, oh, I don't know how this got in there.
I was waiting for that.
That got in. Anyhow, thank you guys. I really appreciate your support in this and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Jeff.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, next item is our quarterly report. So Lori.
Hey, good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors. Okay, so tonight I'm presenting our fourth quarter financial report. Year-to-date figures are for the entire fiscal year ending June 30, 2022. And I just want to say that city's in good shape, and that's good news. And you can see on page 1 where I show our cash positions, our total cash at the end of the fiscal year, June 30, 2022, was 15.7 million. That's a big jump from the prior year of 8.8 million. Mostly that is, the reason for that is that we sold full faith and credit bonds to fund the Cannon Beach Elementary School. And if you see we have a new fund here called the Tourism Facility Renovation Fund. It's kind of in the middle of that green box. We have 4.2 million cash on hand at the end of June 30 for that. So that's really bolstered our cash position. And we also have debt outstanding of 6.5 million, and you'll see the GO bonds 2022 or GO bonds. This is a combination where we refunded the 2 separate bonds into one, and that's $2 billion. And then you'll see 4.5 million represents the full faith and credit for Cannon Beach Elementary. So looking at the general fund, room tax revenues increased 327,000, and that's a really good showing. And that's helping the bottom line, the ending fund balance. And then our expenses, 6.1 million in the general fund, are only 71.4% of the budget. So we're not spending as at capacity, and we are raising more revenue. Our revenue is about 1 million more than it was in the prior year. So those two things combined, you look over at page 4, the bottom, you can see we have a 4.5 million ending fund balance, which is very robust. And going on, tax funds are fine. We sent $523,000 over to the chamber this fiscal year. And the one thing about receiving more room tax than you think you're going to get, or that you budget for, is that when you have to send all the money that you get to the chamber and you didn't budget for that, you can have an issue, and we did over expend that budget line by $42,000. And so I tried to mitigate that by putting extra revenue in there. I don't know if you guys remember me talking about that during the budget, but it just wasn't enough. So it's a possibility we could get a letter from the state, but it's easily explained, and I can write a letter back that explains why that happened. So I'm not worried about it, but it's a possibility, and you're not supposed to overexpend your budget. So the enterprise funds, which are RV park, recycling, wastewater, water, storm drain, those are all in good shape. And if you look page 2, you can see we have this utility fund that we've added, and the bond proceeds go into that fund, and then we are spending on the project costs out of that fund. So it's isolated. The proceeds and the expenses are all together there. If you look at page 5, I always key in on the ending fund balances. All of the funds on this page had increases in their ending fund balance, with the exception of room tax fund, and it's at $928. But like I said, when the money comes in, we immediately give it to, or every quarter we give it to the chamber. So you're not supposed to have anything left over. The other fund that's had a less not an increase in their fund balance is the RV park fund. That's easily explainable because of the transfers that we made out. $500,000 was a big use of the equity there, and 250,000 of it went to the general fund, and another 250,000 went to the RV park reserve. So that is about, and page 6 is the our enterprise funds, utilities. We have all of our ending fund balance increasing except for wastewater. And even though it decreased about $200,000, they still have about $563,000 at the end. So we're still in good shape there. So the debt service fund also decreased. And that's because we didn't levy. We cut the levy back a little bit because we did have a balance there we could use instead of levying more tax. So that was just kind of an adjustment that I had to make, because you don't want to have too much fund balance in your debt service fund, because you want to be able to not levy. You don't have to. So page 7, see the tourism facility renovation fund. If you look at row 2, and that you can see on proceeds coming in. And then if you look at line 4, you can see our bond issuance costs of $91,948. And then the other item is capital outlay, which are the expenditures that we're making on Cannon Beach Elementary. Page 8 is the room tax results, very favorable. Line 2 there, you can see 5.9 million. That's an increase of about $400,000 over the prior year. So things are looking very good. Overall, it was a 7.17% increase. And then page 9, that's just the history of the motel portion of the room tax, the short-term portion of the room tax that we received by quarter. And then again, room page 10, it is fund here, budget to actual results. Page 11 is just summary of the activity in the Tourism and Arts Fund. We distributed $369,000. That's on row 27. But then you'll see on rows 29 through 31. We received back distributions from them because they weren't doing their programs. So we received $112,441 back from some of the event planners. And so extra money there for future events. Page 12, this is where I'm comparing the general fund. 12 months, you know, for 2022 and 2021, just to see from year to year what's happening. This fiscal year, our general fund received $7.2 million, and the prior year was $6 million. So that's about a 1.1 increase from the prior year, which is significant. Contributing to that is room tax went up $327,000. We had American Rescue Plan funding come in that we didn't have the prior year of about $356,000. We have that transfer in from the RV park that I mentioned, $250,000. We did not do that in the prior year. Grants of $79,000. And then our short-term rental permits, you'll recall we raised the fee on that. And so that's bringing in extra $70,325 compared to prior year. That's roughly about $1 million right there in increases. That's kind of how we get to that bottom line. Page 13, these are our top 10. I give you this, I think, once a year, every year. Room tax went down to 67% of our total top 10, as opposed to 75% in the prior year. State revenues have decreased a little, and that is due to our population decrease because those state revenues are distributed on a per capita basis. Planning revenues increased, and so that got bumped up to number 4 revenue. And a lot of that has to do with the short-term rental permit increase. So every category here in the 2022 top 10, every increased from the prior year, except for state revenues, like I mentioned, but only by $3,800. So it was minimal. Page 14, it's asset expenditures. You can see in 2021, we had very little going on. We bumped that up in 2022. 20 projects or equipment purchases, spending 1.8 million as opposed to 180,000 in the prior year. So we've been able to do a lot of infrastructure improvements and buy needed equipment. And
Good job.
any questions?
Seems that our water funds are doing a lot better now that we've kind of revised the rates and gone through that study. So it seems like we're not nearly as off as we were at years past.
Yes,
So we're keeping up with the
yes.
balancing it
We're
out.
doing a rate study too, by the way. We have an RFP out right now that was put in the budget last year. And so we're going to do a formal utility rate study for water, sewer, and storm drain. And we were in a meeting recently with the Business Oregon folks, and they stressed the importance of having that in order to, qualify and make sure that we can repay the debt service on any kind of loan funding we get. So it's really important to have that in place, and I'm excited to get that going.
Very good. Thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Lori.
Oh, Lori, thank you.
Here's a-
Kind of a separate issue from financing standpoint, and that got a little bit more information now on the PFT collections. I can do it as part of Lori's presentation, or I can do it under good the order, or I could just hold it till we have another meeting.
No, go ahead and do it now.
Okay, you pull it. Started with. Once the top is Eco Northwest.
Come on, right?
Yeah, kind of point. Which one?
Button.
Yeah.
Let's just hold that down.
All right. Okay. We started this. We had a study done by Eco Northwest. And the total estimate for prepared food tax was $1.7 million. And the decision was made that there would be a split between the city and the district at 50-50. And so each of us were, whoa. Oh, okay,
That actually works better.
okay, good. That's helping me too. Also, it was going to be split $850,000 for each party. And to determine how much, you see, the first quarter was going to be our first set of collections. And so that's 1 quarter of the year. But we do have a reliable yardstick for that. And that is the first quarter in TLT is 40% of our collections. And so starting from there, you got, whoa. You got to give me a bigger one, Rusty. But $704,000 is what we said needed to be captured in the first quarter in order to make that projection and get it to 850 each. What happened is it came in at 683,000, about $21,000 short. So that gives us an indication that there will be somewhat shorter when we get further down the road. So once you get me to the next, might be good. So anyway, we finally have some progress in the project, both projects. And so I tried to do a little bit of calculation and going back to my I think it was high school proportions. And if 683,000 would be 40%, and then the 800, if you were to go ahead and extrapolate that out, then it's 853,000 would be 100%. And so that tells us instead of 850, I'm sorry, whatever, 880, it's 853. So that's based on the projections that we have. So, but if you remember, there was a discussion that we had about not including beverages. And the reason for that was not because we didn't want to charge 15 cents to somebody for a $3 cup of coffee. It was because we wanted to have a hedge that if we went and just did a food, prepared foods, and we didn't include beverages, we were less likely to run into the cat tax. I think it was, I think it was the cat tax about putting a tax on all of your product. And so we said, well, go ahead and we'll take that off. And we were told at the time by Eco Northwest, and if you do that, you're likely to get it's 12 to 15% if you less than what you would get if you did beverages. And so
And that's non-alcoholic.
you're right. We get nothing from alcohol, but it is coffee, Coke, that kind of thing. So Rusty, can you slide that up or? Okay, good. All right, so then taking the collection from the first quarter, which was 683,000, multiplied it times 1.12 to get that 12%. And then it goes up to the 764,960. And remember, the comparison is to get to 850, we were hoping to get 704,000 in this quarter. Had we charged the same 5%, not raising that, but included beverages, we would actually get to 764,000. And then if you were to do the same exercise, the proportions, then you end up with, instead of 1.7 million, you end up with a 1.9. There a way to make this smaller? All right, thanks. The 900, it comes in at 1,942,000. Good. I don't know what it did before. And then that would result in 971,000 instead of 880 for both Cannon Beach and for the fire district. Rusty, if you go up the next set of numbers. No, the other up. All right, and then just to get a kind of bracket what the numbers would be going to, it was 15%. That came out to 785,000 for the quarter as opposed to 704. And then it would be 1,963,625 would be the total collections. And if you split that between the city and the rural fire district, rural fire district, it's almost $100,000 in that range greater than what we would have, what we were shooting for, which was the 880. So the only reason I'm showing these is that the number seems to be down, and we'll keep an eye on that as we go. But we're going to have some conversations about, okay, how are we going to do this? Because the interest rates have gone up, costs of projects have gone up, those kind of things. And so we have to talk about financing. And so we have to have some sort of a basis to be able to look at some of the costs that have gone up on us. And so I just wanted to show that without making a change as far as saying we're going to go to a higher percentage on the PFT, it is possible to generate additional revenue if we include the things that we took out only to address the initial vote. So I'm not saying that we have to do these things, but even with the collections where we're at now, if we make a minor adjustment, it makes a really big difference in what we would be able to pay in debt service. And also it makes a big difference in what the fire district will be able to do.
Does the original number whatever we ended up with, 683 or 693, does that include the 3 restaurants that didn't pay initially?
Yes. And we'll be talking about Newman's on something tonight, and they have paid too. So we've pretty much gotten everybody except some of the farmers market people. And we're probably going to make a recommendation that we exclude farmers market from this because they're just as much work as the Wayfarer or something. And they're hard to collect from. They're not really working right, this time of year. And it's a little teeny bit in there. And thought that it might have even had an impact on who was willing to come to town because they had to start collecting this tax and those kind of things. So I think that the effort in trying to collect the tax from the people in the farmers market doesn't get balanced out by the funds that come in. And I'm afraid that, maybe we're working against ourselves on the market. So but to answer your question, Nancy, only a couple from the farmers market is not included. So no decisions required tonight. I know that you are anxious to get this information, as was I. And we will be starting meetings with our financial advisors, that whole financial team, and looking at a number of scenarios. And from a timing standpoint, it looks like we don't have to. It would be good if we had both of the projects financed at the same time. because then we save funds, we save money on the cost of issuance. Doesn't have to be that way. But if we do it, we will need at least the initial estimate from a CMGC. And the CMGCs from the Cannon Beach Elementary project said sometime in February for their number. And we're still trying to sort out when we might see something from the folks that are doing City Hall Police Station. So everybody on the team knows that that is a huge deal for us to be able to get to that point. And so we'll let you know as soon as we hear from Cannon Beach Elementary, CMGC, and we'll tell you when we think we'll hear from the CMGC for City Hall. And then at the time we have both of those numbers, we want to have most of the financing paperwork and everything done so that we can make a decision on what we want to do. Okay. All right. Still good.
Thank you, Bruce.
Go ahead. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, next item is parking revisions, Lori.
Okay, it's just pretty much, just putting things back the way they should be. My court clerk, Tessa Fund, has brought this to my attention that we have some inconsistencies with our processes and practices and our ordinance and ticket that we're issuing. So it's a 30-day grace period, not a 14-day. So we want to make that change. And I'm doing that in 10.08.300. You can see the yellow. We want to replace 14 with 30 days. So that's a pretty easy fix. And then the next area that is inconsistent is in 10.08.310, where it talks about a letter will be sent. City manager does not send the letter, comes from the court. And so we are recommending a change and adding the letter B and taking out that first paragraph there where you see the strikeout. A letter will be sent to the registered owner of the vehicle giving them 30 days to pay the new balance. Failure to pay the new balance within 30 days will result in the ticket being sent to collections without further notice. And then C would remain the same, but it would be C now. So if you approve, we can bring this back for a voting meeting and make these changes.
Looks good.
Good.
Okay.
I'm in favor. Thank you.
Next item is variances from the city code for the rejuvenation project. Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have been, all of us have been very excited about some of the presentations and the meetings we've had recently with the design team and with the public, and the tribe about the Cannon Beach Elementary rejuvenation. And you've seen many, at least 3 sets of plans where there was discussion about things that are not necessarily exactly following our code, some of them not even that close. So, but there were ideas that were thrown out and there seemed to be a liking for those. And so what this agenda item is about is asking council, and there are 3, but asking council, are you ready for us to move forward to be able to go through our own process to work through and see what's good, what we'll be able to make it into the final design. And so the items that are included is the variance of the code requirement for parking. And as we know that we are going to be trying to promote more walking from, different parts of the city. I think there's some good opportunities there. We will provide what parking we can. But we can also work with schedules on this. For example, we're not going to go and schedule a Rolling Stones concert in the summer and at 2:00 in the afternoon. There's just makes no sense. But if we do things that are more in the shoulder season, if we do things that are events in the gym and we do them, more towards 5, 6, 7 o'clock, there's a different parking situation or parking dynamic at that time. So we can look at those kind of things, but it does, if we were to meet the requirements that for the gym, for example, if we were to have a big, concert event or something like that, we would either have to not move forward with the project or something like that, or we'd end up paving an awful lot of that site. And it was just for that big event, not necessarily for what we're going to be doing most of the time. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So that's the one for parking. The next thing is that when you look at the gym, there's a sidewalk. And that sidewalk is the extent of the property line. And a lot of people are going to be approaching from the south. And so there's very little room to be able to go ahead and, join with your friends and that kind of thing there in front of the building. And so one of the things that was thrown out, and it does seem to work, is to reallocate 15 feet of Beaver Street right of way to the school property. And so then instead of 5 feet in front of the gym, we would have 20 feet. And that allows parking to be added in front of the classrooms, things like that going down that way. So that's the second item. And then if we do move forward with that item, it's going to change the width of Beaver. And we don't know if we'll end up with enough roadway to be able to have two lanes of cars. And so as a contingency, we are putting in a proposal where Antler and Beaver would become one way, and it would be northbound on Antler and eastbound on Beaver.
Which is just opposite of what the drawing.
Yeah, it's opposite of what the drawing. This was the one that everybody thought made sense until we thought, well, if you have a couple of cars queued up to make a left-hand turn in, you're holding up everybody. So that's why we made that change. And so Jeff you can go ahead and talk about the process if you would like to hear about the process. And what we're looking for now is your direction to say either proceed on all three, proceed on one, whatever. But let us start the process because things are going to have to get in front of the planning commission and other things. And if we need these answers to finalize the design. And so they are time sensitive. They're relatively new developments. And so we're just trying to move it as best we can. Jeff, would you talk about the process?
Yeah, so the process, at least from the three different aspects, as far as the right of way, if the right of way for the that area, I believe that the deed says for throughfare, and so if it is going to remain parking, road, pedestrian, there's really nothing going into the right of way. We'll run it by Bill and Ashley, but I don't think that it's going to require a vacation or anything else with the right of way because you're using it for the purposes intent. We do have processes through Public Works for, allowing other, whether it's lift stations and things like that in the right of way for certain purposes in certain areas. But none of that's projected right now, at least in schematics that are being shown. So I don't see that as a issue. The traffic flow and restriping of the parking, that's all right away, and Public Works processes. Then the zoning planning side of things would be the off-street parking variance. And so that's really your only key element that's going to be going before the planning commission would be that off-street parking variance. And like Bruce said, our off-street parking code is very limited on all the codes I've worked with on off-street parking. Very few uses are even mentioned. And if you can it gives the director some variance in what allows by use, with the new use that's not mentioned within the code. But you can also go before the planning commission for a off-street parking determination on a variant use than what's in the code. So there's really kind of two avenues you can go. You can go through first to get a kind of a determination ruling. And then that would be the suggested way to go, is go work session, then do the kind of ask what the consultant is saying as far as shared and parking and the timing issues, be offset by on and off street parking in the area. And then go before the planning commission with a work session on that, then take that before the planning commission for determination, and then the variance request would follow after they've made that determination. Any questions on that kind of process?
It's the cross hatching here on Fir, on the east side of the property.
That's a turnoff for a bus. We're trying to create like bus opportunities, that sort of thing.
Okay,
I think it's probably going to be more important if we can put one on the opposite side, because that would get people coming the entire length as opposed to people coming from Point North. So
yeah, it's taking up quite a bit.
it is, and we want to make sure that, right now, we're just saying, let's make it big enough so that, we can really use it for that kind of drop off sort of a situation, but it can become less if you want.
Isn't it kind of on the wrong side of the street for the?
That's what I was saying, because if we're going to have people coming from the south to the north, then you want the bus to be on the opposite side. This would work for anybody that we're trying to bring in from the north end or seaside or something like that. So, and we've talked about that as far as the design issue with this.
Beaker is going east. How, I guess this would all come out in the process, but turning left onto Fir could be kind of challenging, couldn't it?
Yeah, it could, or it could be a right turn only.
Okay, so that would be
Yeah.
something to discuss during that.
Yeah, yes. And we're just starting in the transportation issues on it. Well, Red Plains is the name of the company. They're giving this a lot of thought.
I've always thought the one-way pattern would be very beneficial to that, actually to the whole area. It's a 50-foot right of way on both streets, so it's tight.
Mhm.
And I think with a healthy lane and sidewalks, you have enough to work with to get the best use of the parking that we can. But I've also felt that, I agree with what Jeff is saying, is that this is a public works project. This is really enough of a separate entity that we could be doing it on our own now or later or some other time. It's critical to be joined with the renovation project of the buildings, but it is a different setup. And I feel the same way with the idea of the bus turnout. I don't know, that seems to be, if it were me, and the budget is getting a little tight, that'd be the first thing I'd cut. Because it is nice, but it's not necessary. So, especially if you had a project and had a shuttle in town and you had an event at the thing, you're gonna have a shuttle going right straight to the front door anyhow. You're not gonna be parking them up way up there, so I don't know. But I like where it's going. As long as the arrows go the other way.
Except for the arrows. And this, again, this is something you'll be looking at, and I forgot what the date is. But I think it's coming in November someday. The next presentation.
30th.
Yeah, the 30th of November. And so that's when the things like the the bus stop or whatever would be discussed. Main thing that, that I would like to get from the council is on those three items. And as Jeff was talking about, timing and how many iterations we do, that just makes me a little bit nervous on schedule. So, that's why we want to go ahead and get started.
I have a concern about the rush to do things. Have we gotten the pre-work done for the archaeological footprint for the grounds itself?
We have a lot of it, and I had asked council, because I was working with Doug Durr about some students coming in like they did last time and doing a little bit farther north than what we were. And so I think what the decision was from council was that if we run into an issue, we go ahead and we take care of it. I think that what you're talking about is going ahead and saying, let's find out what's there.
Right.
And then we back off. We don't do anything, you know.
Well, the state has it as a priority
Yeah,
level site.
Right.
And for that reason, I think we need to know what we're doing when we do it.
Yeah.
Because they could stop the whole thing.
right. Okay, and this, that issue was my understanding from the conversation with council. And it wasn't anything to do with speed or trying to go ahead and say, well, we won't do that because we don't want to hold things up. We're still working with Doug to try to go ahead and set up the program.
Can you give us a report and get back to us about when that'll start?
Yeah, sure. It'll be after school, because that's when these people become available. But we were looking to do it this summer. And we'll try to get as early in the summer as we can, because depending on how long the design takes and the bidding and everything, we were hoping to start in the summer and kind of work through to late 23 or early 24. So.
It's concerning.
Pardon?
It's very concerning that we're taking the cart before the horse.
Well, I don't see where we're taking the cart before the horse. These are just things that have to be decided. These are things that, the three things are already in the design that you've looked at and had an interest in, and are sending us down the road to go ahead and refine that design. So that's why I just want to start the process, because we don't have anything really final to go ahead and show the planning commission or you yet until we actually have the design finalized. But it's kind of, it's a cart and the horse, because if we don't know what's going to happen with Beaver, if we don't get any kind of a waiver for parking, I mean, there's real implications with that. So the earlier we know, the better off we'll be. And but if at any time council wants to slow things down, that's fine. But I want to make sure that I've not heard that yet. And I just want to make sure that we are meeting your expectation for getting the project done and trying to save the cost, those kind of things. So this is just normal, keeping the project moving.
Well, I know the project these things were supposed to happen during COVID, and then they couldn't get the project together because of that. But this is so important. I mean, there's a village underneath here, and we want to make sure that it's protected. And so making plans and putting things where we don't know that it's okay to do it is upsetting.
But we don't know.
That is knowing where things might be put, like the plaza on the east side, gives us a pretty good idea that maybe they should look there first. So it's a yin yang thing,
Right.
because one of them you have to know where you're going to do the digging to help them know where to look. But you also want them to look so we know where not to dig.
Correct.
So, but we're not going to dig. I mean, you do the planning. That tells you, what you really want to do. if it comes back and says, okay, this is really a bad idea to build anything here, planning is easier to change. You can change that a little bit, you know, you can say, okay, the plaza is not gonna work, or we figure out how to make the plaza not dig at all, you know, things like there, so you need some of the planning first.
And also in talking to Doug, you said most, where the village used to be, kind of comes up to the edge of the blacktop. And they've done underneath the blacktop. And even so, but we're talking about possibly taking that the blacktop up. But, and that's part of the reason we want to go out further into the sand area. But he says that the things are old enough and enough time has passed that probably they're down about 3 to 4 feet. They're not right underneath the surface. So, as a matter of fact, a lot of that area where the, I guess that is the Nakus part, but that has actually been filled since the tribe was no longer there. So I think that he was out there. We had a meeting last Friday, I think it was, and he was out there and we talked about all of these things. And then we came back in and talked about it. And so his thing is if we can go out farther to see if there's anything there. And he was going to go back and look at what the old documents were to see if there was some place that he wanted to go back and look again. But I don't think that we'll be doing anything. If we were able to go ahead and get this process started and midsummer, I don't think that we'll be starting heavy duty construction on the site at that time. And we'll probably be doing an awful lot of it in the buildings.
Well, I just wanted to bring it up because
I'm glad
I
you
can
did.
see it a problem.
No, thank you. And also, it was a concern of the tribes because we're finding that most of the meetings now, we have tribal representatives there. And they were comfortable with what Doug said, being, we've got a good idea here. We might want to go in and just try to verify a little bit more or something.
Mhm.
But further out, that's where he wanted to have a little bit of a cushion. And I don't know, we didn't talk much about the edge of the gym and anything on the east side. But those are the kind of things that he's planning now.
Good.
But the budget for the project, I think, was about 35,000. And we would take that, we can take that from the bond money.
Has anybody gone in there with LiDAR?
They did.
Yeah, that's what it was.
That's what it was.
Yeah, when I was on state parks, they did. In 2016, 17.
Yeah. And I've talked about seeing if we can use that sort of technology on concrete to see if we can see what's like below the gym or possibly around the classrooms, because artifacts have been found past the school and in some of the houses along Antler. So we want to document as best we can.
Well, it's really a wonderful part of
It is.
this. Yeah.
It is. And also, I didn't realize this is probably one of the best remaining sites.
That's why it's a
Yeah.
state priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, the tribe has been involved in the discussions.
Okay. Do you have direction?
No,
No. Oh, well,
if you all are good,
I think
it's proceeding, you're not committing to anything,
Yeah.
but it allows us to say, from the design, they're interested in that, but we still have to go ahead and get our approvals.
Okay.
And you're okay on all three?
Yep.
Good, thank you very much.
next item is an agreement with the tribes for consulting services. Bruce?
That's right. Since we started this project, well, let me go back. The Clatsop-Halen tribe had been on this site for thousands of years before we came along. And so it is a very important site. And the tribe had been involved with the design before this particular effort, but we have dragged them in and moved them into the house kind of thing. And so we've had 6 meetings with the tribe was involved. Two of those were with Dick and Roberta and Joyce, who's the landscape architect. And those are like 4 hours in Portland. And then first meeting where they came for 4 hours and just told their story. And, you know, to CETA, that was the first meeting that CETA had. And then we've had other just design meetings. And so what I'm seeing is that we've got a good architectural team. And they have the knowledge that they have about the tribe that they're acquiring is coming only from the tribe. I'm sorry, they're probably doing some of their own research, but the tribe has been the biggest thing. As far as the city, we're getting our information from them also. And so what I see when we're in these meetings is there's 4 or 5 people from the tribe that have, you know, driven from Bend or Vancouver or Seattle, and they're the only ones in the room. They're the ones that know the most about the site, and that's what we're trying to do the best that we can. Everybody else in the room is getting paid, and they're not. And we are taking that information, and they're spending a lot of time. They're bringing in their own materials. I've seen baskets that are amazing, and they're talking, you know, about the symbolism, the way that, like we did a design, or did a design of how like a speaker's area would be. And they brought back some photographs of a recreation of a traditional speaker's area. And it looked nothing like what, you know, CETA was proposing. And that totally changed it. And everybody got excited about it, but they just didn't know that that's how it would be set up. It was much simpler. So those kind of things. And so I imagine we'll probably have 20 meetings or more, 25 meetings before the end of the project. And these folks are driving in from distance. They're sometimes staying in a hotel, sometimes not. And it just seems kind of, in my mind, it's kind of off kilter that they are not getting paid, and they are such a key part of this process. And so what I'm asking here is, would you direct or allow me to work out some sort of an arrangement with the tribe so that they're not out of pocket every time something happens? And so that's my request, and we can, if you want to assign it to staff and for staff to manage, I think it's within my authority to go ahead and sign something like this. Or if you want us to bring it back, we would bring it to December 6th, Jen?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it's December 6th. So, but I want your approval before we do something like that.
I have a suggestion, and I'm thinking of it being very similar to the Oregon State Parks Commission, where we had our mileage, lodging, stipends for food. We had possibly an honorarium in their case. There should be a list of the different people who would be in this group, like Dee Zimmerly and Dick and Roberta and Ginger Erickson and possibly Todd, Doug Doer and Debbie Gorsuch. And so to have that particular group, maybe some other tribe people if that was recommended, but to keep it to a specific group and possibly check out lodging where a certain hotel would be able to provide a certain amount of, you know, our rent was usually about $100 a night, but it kept it all on a block and it was all equal. Also, I think that the people on this list should have an equal amount, not just one person coming. Because I've noticed sometimes that we have Todd here, but we don't always have some of the other people here. And that would be my recommendation.
One, thank you, and I'm good with that. What I was hoping though, in conversation with Dick, is to keep this as simple as possible for both parties. Instead of them, tracking mileage and doing all that, because to me, there is that time. And there is something, if they stay in a hotel or something like that, there's a lot of time that they are talking about this, thinking about this. Similar to what CETA does when, between our meetings. And so what I was thinking is more along the line of a stipend or a fee per meeting. And then that just went to the 501c3 and we pay that as a cost. And, I have met with our auditor and Ashley and the bond counsel, and they have all said that this can be capitalized under and use bond money. Doesn't mean we have to use bond money, but that we can do that. And so, but just keep it as simple as possible. And that's why I like the idea of a kind of a cost per meeting. And I think there's going to be times when more effort went in, sometimes less. But I really am hesitant to go ahead and put more specifically on us to go ahead and try to find that right point, saying that, well, we are not going to count time you're thinking or whatever. It's just, I'm looking at it more from the value we receive every time we meet with them, as opposed to just their expenses. So my intent would be just to keep it that simple.
What's the 501c3 you're talking about?
Was it the tribal Clatsop-Nehalem Tribal Organization?
I don't know. Are they?
That's, yeah.
501c3?
They're 501c3. They're not a recognized tribe.
I know that.
And that is an entity we can have a contract with.
Maybe Lori could answer. If we do it, we suggested we can capitalize this cost as a contract or the project. Or if we do it on an individual, it's going to be expensed. I don't know whether that can be capitalized if you just do it on mileage and hotel rooms, but for each individual that shows up. So I'm just not certain that can be capitalized in that form rather than expensed.
I think that we can, Mike, because that's how we're paying CETA
On their
by meeting.
travel and,
Yeah, well, no, it's like there's a cost for meetings.
yeah, no, I'm saying
Yeah,
on a cost per meeting,
right.
you can do it. I'm concerned about.
Right, I
I
understand.
understood Robin, what
Yeah.
saying that. They turn in an expense, and I
Yeah.
this many miles, I've stayed here, here's what I had. Stuff.
But it's all thought out ahead of time. It's not just thrown at you. You would have what those things cost. I think it could be a lot more controlled in that regard than just give me a bill.
I just question whether you can capitalize it in the cost of the project rather than. I don't know.
Lori would know, probably.
On CETA's bills, we do reimburse them for mileage and travel. So that's actually on their bills.
Okay,
But there's also the cost, when we talk about the cost, it's the cost of those things into a meeting.
Do you anticipate a number?
I don't have that number. I think that any discussions that we have with the tribe, they're going to they'll lowball themselves. And again, I'm trying to, what I'm looking for is the value that we get and trying to put a number on that. And then it's just like, this is what you get. If you bring 20 people, if you bring 2, whatever, that's what you get. And regardless of where it is, it'll balance out. And then just I just see a real unfairness that everybody's relying on them for information and they're the only ones that aren't getting compensated.
I agree with that.
Yeah, and I don't see their value we receive being tied to items like mileage or something like that. I think it's going to be a larger, it's this much per meeting and we need them we'll need them through this design phase, the next design phase where we get into details. So if we're talking about something that looks like this, then the next one is going to be the details of what that is, the materials, all that kind of stuff. Talking to them about those things. Bidding, not so much, but construction, absolutely there. When we, get into the plannings and the construction questions that, so just trying to be fair on it myself.
Are you talking 70,000? Are you talking 35 or 100?
I don't know, but I bet you it's between the 35 and 70. And, you can ask yourself with the knowledge that they're bringing and information and all that on a, $5 to $8 million project is 70,000 worth it.
Well, I think another way to look at it, Bruce, is exactly how you brought it up with our compensation of CETA. And, if we were to hire someone else to bring in the information that the tribe brings,
Yeah.
they would charge a fee, of course.
Mhm.
And if we just looked at it as a consulting fee, I mean, I don't have a problem one way or the other.
Yeah.
I think they should be compensated, and they should be compensated fairly.
Right.
So I just think that's another way to look at it, and
Mhm.
it justifies it in my eyes.
I'm having a little trouble with this. If we are going to hire the tribes as consultants, it changes what we're asking them to do, or what I think they want to be doing. As far as influencing how we design and create this facility. Their interest is there. They want to help. They want to be involved. As soon as you hire somebody as a consultant, it's a different value of interest to me. And the other aspect is there is more to this site than in this project than the tribal input. So does that mean we need to now hire the History Center as a consultant for the history aspect and the cultural? Do we have to hire Tolovana Arts for the arts aspect of this? Do we have to start paying the Gina Group as consultants because they're going to be involved in the environmental end of this thing? That's where I think we're lacking in the fairness on this. I have no troubles at some point saying, okay, these folks are driving from a long distance. We should probably give them a little bit of funding for that to be included. But I'm not comfortable with the aspect of them being consultants in that sense. So that's just,
Sam, I hear you, but when you use the example of the History Center, that's basically a paid staff. If we're talking about the Tolovana Arts, that's a paid staff. There's nobody paid on their side. Gina currently is not involved whatsoever in this project. And so we're taking what is, and actually, I don't know if we want the tribe's input, Gina's input, and then trying to go ahead and get a project to move forward. I think that the things that the tribe is talking about is, doing a good job with that. And also having Doug on this team, he did the other side of the estuary. And so he's done that project, and we're already talking about doing those kind of things. And so there's somebody that's working on it from an estuary standpoint, and has the expertise. And we're going to invite the History Center to, be ready to come in and do exhibits or whatever they want to do presentations. But probably that'll be, the paid staff. And there won't be nearly any kind of time frame that they'll be working on this project as the 4 or 5 people, 6 people that Robin listed. So that's where I see a difference on it, Sam.
Are we paying Doug?
No, but Doug has a standing offer for a contract. He just wants to be careful that he doesn't want to be seeing too much on one side compared to others that he has to work with. But that's been offered for a while. And he may be more comfortable now. I think he will be compensated when we do the artifact work coming up in the summer, because it's he and one or two other professors are the leads on that. So that's probably more benign than what some other things might be.
What do you think would be more appealing? Because you haven't talked to the tribe about this idea at all.
We talked a little bit about, and they would be thrilled if they got anything. But to me, because I see them every time we had the meetings, and there's a real value to us. And so I'm not trying to get out on the cheap with this.
I'm just kind of thinking of the mileage and, and hotel for if they have to stay overnight. That's their big expense. And if we have just a kind of a flat monthly fee or meeting fee, I guess it's not significant enough. They can determine whether they send one person or six.
Mhm.
If we do it on a mileage and overnight stay, it's like, is that going to encourage more people coming? Because, hey,
Yeah.
we get mileage and we get place to stay and some food. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure you get the efficiency you'd like to have
Mhm.
with that, other than a kind of a fixed price contract for an advisor.
Mhm.
They allocate who and when and how long they stay,
Mhm.
as long as that fee is large enough that it's truly fair and compensating.
Mhm.
Whatever. Maybe end up with a combination of two.
Yeah. Again, I would like to be as simple as possible, and I want them to know that they're valued. And I don't think that they're trying to get rich on this, nor will we allow them to, but
My feeling is you have the authority to put that agreement together. I guess I'd just like to see the summary after you met with the tribe and reached a tentative agreement.
Mhm.
That you come back to the council and say, this is what we worked out. And then some of the anecdotes that go with it and how the negotiations went, rather than just,
if I'm going to bring it back, I'll be fine. We'll just go ahead and have you approve the agreement.
no, I guess that,
Yeah.
bring it back anyway, but
Yeah.
I think there's enough interest in it to at least want maybe I'm wrong, I want him to be here, so.
Mhm.
Or short timer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe to those that might still be here, how they feel. I'm comfortable with knowing how you feel about it and having talked myself with Dick in particular, that they're motivated to keep helping because they want to see this happen.
Mhm.
So it's not a matter of the dollars and cents and whether they get mileage but there's a recognition of the value they're providing.
Yes.
And the best way to recognize the value that the tribe, not just Dick or Roberta or Todd, but the value the tribe is providing, I think the best way is a fee. And whether it's a monthly or per meeting, probably per meeting, is the best way to recognize the value of the tribe's input.
Yep.
Rather than just covering expenses.
Mhm.
Anyway, it's just my thought. Frankly, whether you bring it back or not, I think you have the authority to do it, but
I have a sense, I don't know the tribe's current leadership well, but I do have a sense of Dick and Doug and some of the other folks. And I would bet that if I were to offer them $50,000 for the tribe or $50,000 guaranteed artwork in the project, they would go with the project. But, or a percentage of the total for the artwork. But that's just me just trying to figure out what somebody else is going to do. I think I agree with Mike. The simplest way is to offer the tribe a flat amount for consulting services. Not get it all tangled up into traveling and stuff like that. Other than that, so.
Maybe you should talk to them first before you start creating a document.
I wanted to make sure of your level of support before I did talk to him.
You have my support.
Yeah, mine too.
I think your motives are right on. Be fair about it.
Okay, that's the whole thing. I'll bring something back to you.
Okay,
Hopefully even an agreement for the December 6th. Okay, thank you very much. Yep.
I think this is the last one. That fair request for a point of sale issue. That one up.
Yes, I'm just asking Rusty to put one more up. We have a request through Escape Lodging for Mrs. Newman from Newman's 988. Had a lot of things going on in the summer and was not able to participate in the grant program we had for the prepared food tax. And so we have been having discussions about that. They're at a something chef or whatever that everybody in the business is at tonight. And so I have, you have in your materials a proposal from Toast Quote, and it is virtually unfollowable and doesn't really get us very far because they also include the monthly costs and all those kind of things. But we're able to simplify it. And if you go to page 1, at the bottom of the page, there's a number, and this is for hardware, and it's $23.59. Okay. Then if you go to page 3, there's a number just above where it says ongoing services and support. That is $1,049.50. Okay. What the top item in that same category is $150. The Toast payroll and team management specialists, et cetera. And we weren't paying for payroll for anybody. It was for the PFT related costs. And so if you turn up here, you can see that the $23.59, we're good. That's all equipment. And then the onboarding, these are all costs with the exception of the $150, which was for payroll. And so you take the $150 from the $1,049, it's $899. You add the $899.50 to, I don't know how I ended up with an extra 50 there, but $899.50 to the $23.59. That means if you decide to allow the grant or the reinstate the grant, it's $32.58.50. When I was looking at this, I was figuring it was around $10,000. So, but that is what would be requested right now. We opened the program and we closed it, I think, like at the end of April. And this was not a good time for the business. And so what they're hoping is that they can get something to be able to do the system. We found that they did not have a system at that time. There was an individual that would do the accounting and did it all on paper, and they're still doing it that way. And so some of the businesses, we turned some down, but that was because they already had a system that would work. And so we didn't say we were going to pay for that. So in this case, they will have a system that will be able to do the work. It'll make it much easier for them. I had another concern, which somebody allayed my fears. I was concerned, like, what happens next if, because they couldn't be here tonight to talk. And if there was a situation where they've not paid, and would we be looking for an extension there? And they have paid. So they are paid up for the first quarter. And so it's just a matter of getting a system. They never had a system before. And this is kind of right what we were trying to do the grant for. So you have a couple of decisions. One, will you allow the process to open up for them to be able to go ahead and do this grant? And then after that, I think it's a staff issue on what we approve, but I've already put up on there how that would work.
I noticed one of your figures says, or what's included in the 1,049 as well as that 150 is on-site travel, 375. Would that be part of?
I understood that to be implementation. For the equipment, because I don't know if there was an implementation with the
This says
equipment.
core implementation plus 3 tablets is what? 524.
Mhm.
And then it says on-site travel, 375.
Well, the core implementation was for 3+ tablets. I think you get the tablets over on the other page. But anyway, the discussion I had was with Coral. And we tried to figure out what would be a reasonable number. And that's what we came up with. And if you decide to move forward with it, I would ask that you give staff some latitude in case I'm missing some tablets or something that goes with it. But generally, I think we're in this neighborhood. So I think that those are your 2 decision points.
I'd really like to see us go forward with this. That was a difficult time for them.
Yep.
And I appreciate they've come forward to ask.
Yeah, I agree.
I think also that the grant system that we offered was so underappreciated. We do have, we didn't have the expenditure I thought we were going to have. So that doesn't bother me. I want everybody to understand that this is a unique situation.
Sure.
And it does not mean everybody needs to apply for grants again. But no, I totally agree. I think this is a go.
Yes, I agree. I was just going to ask Bruce, because I didn't hear a dollar figure. Were we quite a ways under what we had initially budgeted for the grant?
I think we thought that maybe it would be in the 30,000 range. And, possibly even higher, but it worked out that, we didn't get many applications. And when we had, and I forgot the lady's name that went around everything, everybody said, well, yeah, I've been able to modify my system. And so I think we were probably less than 8 or 10,000.
Mhm.
So
I think the prediction that was initially made that all of the systems were already set up to accommodate this, because they've been distributed all over the country.
Yeah.
Tax is already implemented.
right. Well, actually, if we finish, it's going to break my back if I have to pay this. Sorry.
Well, there was a couple instances where grants were requested that we didn't know.
Yeah.
But there was criteria for that.
Right.
So, okay. Okay. I think that's all.
If I have it, you are agreeing to open up the grant program and starting with a base figure like 3258, we will it'll be in that range, but if we made any mistakes in trying to figure out what should be included from this quote, that we have the authorization to make that adjustment. Okay. Thank you.
Great. I think that ends our agenda. So anybody have anything for good of the order?
I just want to mention that I did my survey again this year, like I did last year, of homes that have been sold in Cannon Beach for the past year from October to the end of September of this year. And I've had 75 homes that I could find in the tax assessor's office. And once again, only 12%, just exactly like last year, only 12% were local addresses of people who bought homes here. The rest were from out of state or out of city. So some were from out of the country, but yeah, only 12% of locals bought homes here.
Interesting. Anybody else?
Happy with the counselor?
What's that?
What's that?
Coffee with the counselor?
Oh, well, that's November 21st. So that's 2 weeks from today, tomorrow, yesterday.
Okay. And when's the next outreach for the 30th?
No, it's
There's one Saturday for City Hall
Saturday for City Hall,
and the 30th for the elementary school.
30th for the elementary.
So
Okay.
Saturday at 10 a.m.
And we have an executive session next Wednesday. And
4 p.m.
yeah, because Bruce wanted to talk about something at 4 o'clock and then the evaluation portion of it would be at 5. I have to be out of here by 6. So I don't know if that's going to give us enough time for all of our discussion. I'm kind of wondering if we could move it up a half hour, like to 3:30. I don't know if that's possible.
That's okay with me.
Okay. with-
Yeah.
Is that all right with you?
I'm pretty sure it's fine with Ashley since she'll be driving over anyways.
3:30 then.
And I'm posting tomorrow, so for me, I'll be like, just in time to be ready.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
With that, then we are adjourned. Thank you.